It was a typical Thursday evening when the sound of laughter floated from the kitchen. James, a devoted husband and father of two, paused in the hallway, his heart warm from the joy of hearing his family together. But as he approached, something felt off. His wife, Laura, was on the phone, her voice a little too cheerful, too flirtatious. James leaned closer, careful not to make a sound. "Of course, you're the only one who truly understands me," Laura whispered, chuckling softly. James froze. Who was she talking to? He knew that tone. He hadn't heard it in years, not directed at him. He backed away, his heart pounding, his mind racing. Was it just a misunderstanding? Or was something more sinister at play? Stick with me until the end of this story to uncover the shocking truth that turned James's world upside down. James decided not to confront her immediately. Instead, he started paying attention. Over the next few days, he noticed small things, a sudden burst of late-night texts, her phone always glued to her hand, and the way she seemed distant, even when sitting right next to him. Then came the breaking point. While tidying up one evening, James found an envelope tucked under a pile of papers on Laura's desk. It wasn't addressed to him, but rather to someone named Aiden. Inside was a letter filled with affection, apologies, and promises of a future together. James's hands shook as he read the words. He felt anger, betrayal, and disbelief all at once. He had been a loving husband, hadn't he? He provided for his family, supported Laura in everything she did, and adored their two kids. But then, a terrifying thought crossed his mind. What if the children weren't his? James knew he needed answers. He decided to hire a private investigator to uncover the truth. Days turned into weeks, and James lived with the torment of not knowing. The investigator finally returned with damning evidence, photos of Laura meeting Aiden, sharing secret moments that should have been reserved for her husband. The investigator also confirmed the unthinkable. Aiden had been in their lives for years, hidden in plain sight. James felt his world crumbling, but the worst was yet to come. Fueled by suspicion, he decided to take a DNA test for both children. He hoped against hope that the results would prove him wrong, that at least his children were truly his. The day the results arrived, James sat in his car, staring at the envelope. His hands trembled as he opened it. The words blurred in front of his eyes, but the meaning was clear. He wasn't the biological father of either child. His breath caught in his throat, and a wave of devastation crashed over him. The betrayal wasn't just about him. It was about the life he thought he'd built, the family he thought he had. But James wasn't a man to wallow in despair. Betrayed and heartbroken, he decided to take action. He filed a lawsuit against Laura for paternity fraud, a move that shocked everyone around them. Friends and family whispered about it, taking sides, while Laura pleaded with him to drop the case. "I made a mistake, James," she cried. "But we can fix this. We can start over." James looked at her, his eyes filled with pain and resolve. "You didn't just betray me, Laura. You destroyed our family, our trust, and the future I thought we had. There's no going back." And so, the courtroom battle began, with secrets unraveling and truths coming to light. But would justice be served? Would James find closure? James sat in the courtroom, his hands gripping the edge of the bench. The room buzzed with whispers as Laura entered, looking fragile yet defiant. This wasn't how he'd imagined their lives would turn out. He had loved her, trusted her. Now, they were enemies, facing off in a legal battle over the truth. Stay with me until the end to uncover the shocking revelations that turned this case into a fight for justice no one could have predicted. The lawyer began by laying out James's case, paternity fraud. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a deception that had robbed him of years he could never get back. James's voice cracked as he testified, recounting the moment he learned the children he adored weren't his. "I held them in my arms the day they were born," he said, his eyes glistening. "I taught them how to ride bikes, stayed up with them when they were sick. And now I find out it was all a lie." Laura's lawyer was quick to respond, painting a picture of a woman who had made mistakes but had tried to protect her family. "Yes, Laura made an error in judgment," her lawyer said, glancing at the jury. But she never stopped being a loving mother. The children still see James as their father. Isn't that what truly matters? James clenched his fists under the table. Love didn't justify lies. It didn't erase years of deceit. Then came the bombshell. The private investigator James had hired took the stand, presenting photos, messages, and even receipts that revealed the depth of Laura's relationship with Aiden. One message, read aloud, sent gasps through the courtroom. I wish I could tell James the truth, but he's too good of a man. He doesn't deserve this. Laura looked down, tears streaming down her face. But the worst revelation was yet to come. The investigator unveiled financial records showing that Laura had secretly funneled money from their joint account to Aiden for years. Vacations, gifts, even rent. It had all been hidden from James, a trail of betrayal stretching further than he could have imagined. The judge ordered Laura to take the stand. Her voice was barely a whisper as she tried to explain. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, she said. I was lost, confused. Aiden was a mistake. But James, you were always the one who kept our family together. James stared at her, his heart aching despite the anger. If I meant so much to you, why didn't you stop? Why didn't you tell me the truth? The courtroom fell silent as Laura struggled to answer. But before she could, Aiden entered the room. He had been subpoenaed, and his testimony threatened to shatter what little remained of Laura's defense. Aiden's words were cold and calculated. He admitted to the affair, to knowing the children weren't James's, and to encouraging Laura to keep it all a secret. I didn't care about James, Aiden said with a smirk. I cared about what I could get from Laura. And she gave me everything I asked for. James felt a fresh wave of anger. It wasn't just Laura's betrayal. Aiden had taken advantage of her, and by extension him. As the court adjourned for the day, James walked out, his mind racing. He wasn't just fighting for justice anymore. He was fighting for his dignity, for the truth, and for the future he deserved. The next day would bring a verdict, but it would also bring something no one expected, a twist that would change everything. The courtroom was packed as the judge called the session to order. James sat at the plaintiff's table, his face a mask of determination. He had spent sleepless nights preparing himself for this moment. Across the room, Laura sat with her lawyer, looking worn and pale. The stakes were higher than ever, and the tension was palpable. Stay with me until the end to uncover the shocking twist that nobody saw coming. The judge addressed the room. This case isn't just about paternity fraud. It's about trust, honesty, and the consequences of deception. We've heard the testimonies and reviewed the evidence. But before we proceed to the verdict, there's one final piece of information the court has received. James frowned, exchanging puzzled looks with his lawyer. Laura looked equally confused. What new evidence could possibly emerge now? The judge motioned to the bailiff, who handed over a sealed envelope. This DNA test, the judge began, was submitted anonymously. It includes a sample from one of the children and someone unexpected. James's lawyer immediately objected. Your Honor, this evidence was not disclosed prior to today. The judge raised a hand to silence him. Normally, I would disregard such evidence. But in this case, the implications are significant. The court will allow it. The room was dead silent as the judge opened the envelope and read the report. A look of shock crossed their face. This DNA test reveals that neither Mr. James nor the man known as Aiden is the biological father of the youngest child. Gasps erupted in the courtroom. James's heart sank, while Laura's face turned ashen. She began to shake her head furiously. That's impossible, she cried. There's no one else. This has to be a mistake. The judge ignored her outburst and continued. The test results indicate a third party's involvement. The court demands an explanation, Mrs. Laura. Laura's lawyer leaned in, whispering frantically, but Laura was too stunned to respond. Finally, through tears, she stammered, I don't know. I can't explain it. James felt a mix of fury and heartbreak. This was beyond betrayal. It was chaos. He couldn't believe the woman he'd trusted with his life had kept so many secrets. The judge adjourned the session to investigate the origin of the anonymous DNA submission. Outside the courtroom, James confronted Laura. Another man? After everything, he demanded, his voice trembling with anger. Laura sobbed, shaking her head. I swear, James, I don't know what this is. I only ever with Aiden. I swear it. Her words felt hollow, but James didn't have time to process them. His lawyer approached with a grim expression. We need to prepare, James. This revelation could change the entire case. If this third party comes forward, it could mean the children's custody and future are in question. James nodded, his mind reeling. He had fought for justice, but now the battlefield had shifted entirely. As they left the courthouse, a figure approached, a man James didn't recognize. He handed James a note and disappeared into the crowd. James unfolded it, his pulse quickening as he read the words. I know the truth about Laura. Meet me tomorrow, and I'll tell you everything. The note was unsigned, and James had no idea who the man was, or if he could be trusted. But one thing was clear, the final piece of the puzzle was about to fall into place. James sat in his car outside the meeting spot, clutching the note tightly. The words replayed in his mind like a broken record. I know the truth about Laura. Meet me tomorrow, and I'll tell you everything. He wasn't sure what to expect. Was this a trap? Another cruel twist? But he knew he couldn't ignore it. Stay with me until the end of this part to uncover the shocking secret that would change James's life forever. The location was a quiet park on the outskirts of town. James spotted the man sitting on a bench, a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He seemed calm, but there was an intensity in his posture that put James on edge. Are you the one who sent the notes? James asked as he approached. The man nodded, gesturing for James to sit. I didn't know how else to reach you. But you deserve to know the truth. Who are you? James demanded, his patience wearing thin. What do you know about Laura? The man sighed, removing his cap. He looked older than James had expected, with deep lines etched into his face. My name is Victor. Laura and we had a history. Years ago, before she met you. James felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of histories? Victor hesitated, then looked James straight in the eye. Laura and I were together for a long time. We were serious. But she left me. Said she wanted a different life, something I couldn't give her. James's fists clenched. What does that have to do with me? Victor reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. Everything. You see, a few years after she left, Laura reached out to me. She was desperate. She said she'd made a mistake marrying you and wanted me back. James's breath caught in his throat. What are you saying? Victor opened the folder, revealing photos and documents. I'm saying Laura never stopped seeing me. Not entirely. She'd come to me when things weren't going well between you two. And I'm the biological father of your youngest child. James stared at the photos, his mind spinning. There they were, images of Laura and Victor together, timestamps confirming they were taken during his marriage. The DNA report Victor handed him sealed the truth. She never told me, Victor continued. I didn't even know about the child until recently. When I found out, I submitted my DNA anonymously. I didn't want to hurt you, but I couldn't keep quiet anymore. James felt like the ground had disappeared beneath him. Why are you telling me this now? Victor's voice softened. Because you deserve to know the truth. Laura's been playing both of us. You're a good man, James. Better than I ever was. You didn't deserve any of this. James sat back, his head pounding. The betrayal wasn't just deeper than he'd imagined. It was bottomless. His marriage, his family, his entire life had been built on lies. Do the kids know? James asked, his voice barely audible. No, Victor replied. And I don't want to hurt them. That's why I stayed away. But you needed to know. The rest is up to you. James left the park in a daze. His mind raced with questions, his heart heavy with emotions he couldn't even name. He knew he had to confront Laura, but this time, it wouldn't just be about their marriage. It would be about their children, their future, and the shattered pieces of their past. James sat at the dining table, the folder Victor had given him resting in front of him. He stared at it for what felt like hours, his mind replaying every moment of his life with Laura. The laughter, the arguments, the quiet evenings, All of it now felt like a cruel illusion. He knew this confrontation wouldn't just be about exposing the truth. It would be about reclaiming his dignity and deciding what came next. Stay with me until the end of this part to see how James uncovers Laura's reaction and makes the hardest choice of his life. When Laura walked into the room, she paused, sensing the tension. "What's this about?" she asked, her voice uncertain. James gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit down. We need to talk." Reluctantly, Laura sat, her eyes darting to the folder. "What's that?" James's voice was calm, but icy. "It's the truth, Laura. About Victor. About the children. About everything you've been hiding." Her face paled, and she instinctively reached for the folder, but James pulled it away. "Not so fast. You don't get to control this anymore. I've already spoken to Victor. He told me everything." Laura's eyes filled with tears. "James, I can explain." "Explain?" James interrupted, his voice rising. "Explain what? That you've been lying to me for years? That you had an affair with Victor while we were married? That our youngest child isn't even mine?" Laura broke down, sobbing into her hands. "I never meant for this to happen. I was confused, James. I thought I loved him, but I chose you. I wanted to build a life with you." James shook his head, his anger boiling over. "You chose me? Laura, you didn't choose me. You used me. You let me believe this family was real while you carried on with him behind my back. And worst of all, you didn't even give me the chance to know the truth about my own child." Laura reached out to him, but James pulled away. "I thought I could fix it," she pleaded. "I thought if I stayed, if I tried harder, it would all work out." "You thought wrong," James said, his voice steady but cold. He opened the folder and slid the photos and DNA results across the table. "Look at this. This is your legacy, Laura. Lies, deceit, and betrayal." Laura stared at the documents, her sobs growing quieter. For the first time, she looked defeated, as though the weight of her actions had finally crushed her. "What do you want me to do?" she whispered. James stood, his resolve solidifying. "I want you to face the consequences. I'm moving forward with a lawsuit. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it for the truth. The kids deserve to know where they come from, and I deserve a chance to rebuild my life without your lies hanging over me." Laura's eyes widened. "You can't tell the kids. Please, James. They'll never forgive me." James hesitated, the thought of the children's innocent faces tugging at his heart. But he knew the truth was unavoidable. "They deserve honesty, Laura. You've taken so much from me, but I won't let you take their right to know who they are." Laura crumbled, sobbing uncontrollably. James turned away, his heart heavy but resolute. He had made his decision. As he walked out of the house, he felt a strange mix of emotions: grief for what he had lost, relief that the lies were finally unraveling, and determination to start over. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was walking toward the truth. James sat in his lawyer's office, papers spread out before him. The lawsuit against Laura was in motion, and although it was emotionally draining, he knew it was the right thing to do. It wasn't just about the money or the betrayal, it was about reclaiming his dignity and finding closure. But there was still the question of the children. Stay with me until the end of this part to see how James takes the first steps toward healing and faces an unexpected twist that will change everything. The next day, James sat the children down in the living room. Their curious faces broke his heart, but he knew they deserved the truth. "I need to tell you something important," he began, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "It's about your mom and me. Things haven't been honest between us, and it's time you knew the truth." He carefully explained the situation, leaving out the more painful details. When he mentioned the DNA test, the youngest child, Emma, looked confused. "What does that mean?" Emma asked, her eyes wide. James took a deep breath. "It means that I'm not your biological dad. But that doesn't change how much I love you. I've been your dad since the day you were born, and that will never change." Tears streamed down Emma's face as she hugged James tightly. "You'll always be my dad," she whispered. The older child, Ryan, looked angry. "Is this why Mom's been crying so much? She messed everything up, didn't she?" James placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder. Your mom made mistakes, but this isn't about blame. It's about making sure we move forward with honesty and love. After the conversation, James felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The truth was out, and while it hurt, it was a step toward healing. A few days later, James received a phone call from an unexpected person, Victor. I want to meet the kids, Victor said, his tone cautious. I know this is sudden, but I think it's important for them to know who I am. James hesitated. He didn't want to confuse or hurt Emma any further, but he also knew that hiding Victor's identity would only cause more issues down the road. I'll talk to them about it, James replied. But if this happens, it'll be on their terms. Victor agreed, and the two men ended the call. James couldn't believe he was having this conversation, but he also felt a strange sense of relief. The tangled web of lies was finally unraveling, and while it was messy, it was also liberating. Later that evening, as James was sorting through old photos, he received a text from an old friend, Sarah. Hey, heard about what's been going on. Just wanted to check in. Let me know if you need anything. James smiled for the first time in days. Sarah had been a close friend in college, someone he had lost touch with over the years. Her message felt like a lifeline, a reminder that he wasn't alone. He replied, Thanks, Sarah. It's been rough, but I'm getting through it. Let's catch up soon. As James hit send, he felt a spark of hope. His world had been turned upside down, but maybe, just maybe, he could start building something new from the ruins. Weeks turned into months, and James found himself adjusting to his new reality. The lawsuit against Laura was settled out of court, with a fair agreement that allowed him to move forward. Victor had met Emma under carefully controlled circumstances, and while the introduction was emotional, it was handled with respect for everyone involved. But the biggest surprise in James's life came from an unlikely source, Sarah. Stay with me until the end of this part to see how James's life takes a hopeful turn after so much heartbreak. Sarah and James had started meeting for coffee, reminiscing about their college days and talking about the challenges they'd both faced. Sarah had been through her own struggles, a tough divorce, and the difficulty of raising two teenagers alone, but her resilience inspired James. One crisp evening, they sat on a park bench overlooking the lake, their conversation flowing naturally. You've been through so much, James, Sarah said, her voice soft but firm. But look at you now. You've fought for your truth and your kids. That takes courage. James smiled, feeling a warmth he hadn't felt in years. I couldn't have done it without support. You've been amazing, Sarah. More than I deserve, honestly. She shook her head. Don't say that. You deserve happiness, James. Everyone does. Their eyes met, and for the first time in what felt like forever, James allowed himself to hope. The kids had also started to adapt. Emma still called James Dad, and their bond remained as strong as ever. Ryan had taken on the role of the protective older brother, vowing to look out for Emma no matter what. James's heart swelled with pride every time he saw his children's resilience. One evening, as they were having dinner, Ryan asked, Dad, do you think we'll ever feel normal again? James set down his fork and looked at his son. Normal is overrated, Ryan. What matters is that we stick together and support each other. We're not broken, we're just different now. Ryan nodded, a small smile forming on his face. As life slowly settled into a new rhythm, James and Sarah's friendship deepened. One day, she invited him to her son's basketball game. Watching her cheer from the sidelines, James couldn't help but admire her energy and love for her kids. After the game, as they walked to their cars, Sarah turned to James. You know, this is the happiest I've been in a long time. It's nice having someone who understands. James reached for her hand, his heart racing. I feel the same way. Maybe we can keep building this happiness together. Sarah smiled, her eyes sparkling with emotion. I'd like that. For the first time in years, James felt like he was stepping into a future filled with possibilities. The scars of betrayal and heartbreak would always be there, but they no longer defined him. With his children by his side and Sarah as a new light in his life, James knew he was ready to embrace whatever came next. And so, from the ashes of his past, James began to write a new chapter, one filled with honesty, love, and hope. What do you think of James's journey? Have you ever experienced a moment where life gave you a chance to start over? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.